Well, Merry Christmas to you all. You know, as Catholics, we celebrate Christmas for 12 days. And so I think we have 9 more days left until the end of the saying Merry Christmas, but not the end of the Christmas season. I pray that you had a beautiful Christmas day with your friends or family. And if you spent some time alone, that you at least spent some time with the Lord Jesus in this special time. Today's saint, I should say, today's feast day for me is a very special feast day. He's my namesake, so Saint John. He has 3 titles in the church, so the apostle, the evangelist, and he's known in the East as the theologian. And why is that? Because of the closeness he had with the Lord, he was able to enter into a more profound understanding of who Christ was and who Jesus is for us. And our relationship with him. You know, in that first reading, it says, what we've seen and heard, what we've touched with our own hands. And yet, this one is the Word, the one who existed before existence existed. But I want to focus, I have to keep it focused to the gospel today because there's so much I can preach and talk about St. John. I can spend an entire hour on the figure of St. John. So I want to focus just specifically on today's gospel. And the reflection I'm giving is kind of based on two 20th century Catholic mystic and a theologian. So Father Hans Urs von Balthasar and a mystic named Adrian von Speyer. And their description of the two great figures in the church based on this gospel. And what do we have? We have Mary Magdalene, who is known as the apostle of the apostles, right? She announced the risen Lord to his apostles so that they can go out and announce the risen Lord to the world. And you have these two figures of John and Peter. John represents a certain deeper love or deeper relationship with the Lord Jesus. And why is that? Well, in the tradition, they would say that John had a more purified love for the Lord because he was, one, a virgin and a chaste man. And the Lord allowed, through that chastity and through that purity, the Lord allowed him into a deeper understanding of who he was, not for the sake of himself, so not for the sake of John, but for the sake of communicating that to the world, or communicating Christ to the world, to understand even deeper who Jesus is. And that is the Son of God, the second person of the Blessed Trinity, the Word, right, that existed since time, since the beginning. And so John goes immediately, runs to the tomb. As soon as Mary Magdalene announces that he is risen, John immediately runs to the tomb. Well, we also have the figure of Peter, who also runs along with John to the tomb. And as it's described here, John ran faster. He arrived at the tomb before Peter. Now, who is Peter in this gospel? Well, Peter, as some would say, represents the office, right? The office of Peter, the apostolic office, authority, a certain governance over Holy Mother Church that Christ himself gave him. And so John, even though he loved in a bit more deeper way, allows for Peter to enter into the tomb first, respecting the office of Peter and knowing that that was given by Christ to Peter. And so we have today, brothers and sisters, a very special saint. You know, he's known as also the theologian. He's known as the apostle, the evangelist. He's the one that received Mary. Remember, all of the apostles and most of the disciples left when Jesus was dying on the cross. And while on the cross, Jesus gave his mother to this beloved disciple, John. And from that moment, what does it say? The Gospels say that John, he took her into his home and cared for her. So John has this deep intimacy, always in purity and always in chastity, a deep intimacy with the risen Lord, to the one that whom is love himself, but also shares a deep intimacy with the Mother of God, with Mary, because he took her into his home. And so John kind of represents this this profound charism of love within the church that is always geared towards communicating anew who Jesus is for the world. It always leads back to Jesus. It's because of Jesus. It's for Jesus. It's for the sake of communicating his mission to the world. That's what that love does. And so we would say that there's a certain charism that comes about with the Apostle John and following that charism of being a chaste, poor, obedient man or woman to the Lord for the sake of communicating the gospel within his church. So John represents so much. Historically, he was like all of the apostles were martyred. Well, except for John. So John was poured or dumped into a hot oil in the Porta Latina in Rome, and he came out better than what he than how he came into the hot oil. And so the tradition has it, at least St. Augustine, I believe, says this, is that he was the apostle that never faced martyrdom. That in fact he died in Ephesus, and his body continues to be present. At least that's St. Augustine. Now I don't know about all that. But what's known too in the tradition about John is that as he got older, John old man, and his disciples would bring him out, and we know who his disciples were. Polycarp, one of the great disciples, sub-apostolic age, Ignatius of Antioch. So there are writings about who followed John in the mission. Anyway, his disciples would pull him out. He's an old man, and his arms would be stretched out, and at this point he couldn't walk. And the one thing he would always say, the one phrase he would always say is, "Love one another." I said, "Love one another." And finally, his disciples in the church present there at Ephesus would say, "Apostle John, you say this all the time, love one another. What that's what we're trying to do." And he would say, because, love came into this world. And when you have understood in a very profound way who the Son of God is and why he entered into this world, and that deep relationship that deep intimacy and relationship he wants to have with each and every one of us, our only response can be love. That's the only response. Some would say his love and his mercy. So the Apostle John kind of shows us who in a deeper way Jesus is, and communicating that to others for the sake of the mission, but in a deeper way, always based and founded in deep love. Merry Christmas. Peace.